So I got a quick question for you. Are you tired of seeing this or this on your screen all the time? Are you looking for a way to get rid of it? Well, I got some great news for you. You can install Adguard directly on your MikroTik router as a Docker container. Now this is super useful for various reasons because A, you don't need another dedicated piece of hardware for this, and B, you're running this straight off of your router, so that is really awesome. So let's actually jump into the video and configure our own AdguardHome server on our MikroTik. Now, if you've never worked with a Docker or container before, what I recommend you do is check out this 3-part series on the MikroTik channel. They do an amazing job of explaining how Dockers work in general in their environment. It's amazing to check out and I love it. A few things I want to stress is check that you have sufficient resources available. So don't try and run big containers if you just have a small HAP device. And on that point, your device needs to at least be ARM64 or a virtual router like a CHR, which is what I'm using to facilitate the Docker containers. You can't run this on older pieces of hardware. It's also recommended to have something like an external drive that you can store all of the data or the container information on. And you also need a specific version of RouterOS. Now I recommend having at least version 7.6, but I do believe version 7.5 also supports Dockers just fine, even 7.4, but they've made so many strides with all of their settings and stuff on Docker or containers in general that 7.6 or 7.7 beta is really good for Dockers right now. So with that out of the way, let's actually configure our Dockers. Now, first thing I'm going to do is just go into Winbox and I will just configure a virtual network for my Dockers. So to start off, I will just head into my bridges and I'll add a new bridge because this bridge is where I can then basically bind all of my Docker interfaces to. So I will just call this Dockers. I'll hit apply. Next step is I want to just assign an IP address to this Docker interface. So I will head into my IP addresses. I'll add a new IP address. And this address I am going to make 10.0.0.1/24. It's up to you to decide what you want to make it, whatever you're comfortable with, just as long as it's not a range that's currently in use in your network, obviously, go for it. But private IPs are fair game. And I will just bind this to my Dockers bridge. So that's done. Next step, we need to actually create the virtual interface that the Docker can use to communicate with the rest of the network. So I will go back into my interfaces. I'll go into veth or veth, and then I'll just add a new virtual Ethernet interface. I can give it a name. So this could just be veth1, or I could give it a specific description like veth1 Adguard to know that this is the Adguard's veth interface, but you don't need to do that. It's just a name. Next step is I can give this interface a specific IP. So this I'm going to make 10.0.0.2/24. And then my gateway needs to be what this NIC is going to use as its default gateway out to the rest of the network and the intranet. And that is going to be the IP that I've bound to my bridge, 10.0.0.1. I'll hit apply. And now I have this virtual interface. Next step, or the last step for the virtual network, is just to go back into our bridges and bind that veth interface to our Docker's bridge. So I'm just doing that now, hitting apply, and now we have this virtual network set up. So yay, first step done. Now, next step that I recommend is going into your containers, because this is where MikroTik has made many strides. Before you had to do all of this from the command line. Now you can click on this container menu and everything is in here that you need to start working. Now you do have different options, your containers, mounts, and environments or environment variables, but we'll just specifically be looking at the container portion to bring this container up and running. We also want to look at this config section, because with config, there's a few things you can set. So you can basically limit the amount of RAM that your Dockers can consume with this. You can set a registry URL, which is in essence where it's going to be pulling images from, where it's going to be downloading those containers off of. Now what I've currently set this to is as https://registry-1.docker.io, which is basically the Docker hub, which is where you'll definitely want to go to get most of your containers from. And then this temp dir is just where it will be, kind of think of this as where it's going to be storing this container while it's extracting it to just have the file saved somewhere on disk. Now next step is actually adding the container. So for this we can just click on plus and we can specify a remote image. If you've uploaded a Docker file, you can actually find it here and use that to import the Docker, but I will be using a remote image, which I'm going to be finding from the Docker hub. So let me just bring over this URL. It is hub.docker.com, and from here you can download a wide range of different Docker containers. Now you can, it's not just Adguard, there's really so many different types of containers that you can use in your own environment that you can run inside the MikroTik. I see people always testing different containers to see what works and what doesn't work as well. But let's search for Adguard. And once we search for this and we scroll down a little bit, we'll see there's an Adguard /AdguardHome. So we can see which platforms this work on: Linux, 386, x86-64, ARM, ARM64, etc. So let's go in here because this looks like what we want. And as we scroll down, we can see additional details about how to configure it and the quick start guide and all these wonderful, wonderful bits of information. But I'm just going to go back up, because if we look at the tags, this is in essence what you can use to download either a specific version of the Docker container, but we're going to use the latest tag to just make sure we get the latest update of this Docker container. So let's go back onto our MikroTik, and our remote image is just going to be like on the website, Adguard /AdguardHome : latest. That's it. Other few things that I want to specify here is my root dir, which is basically just where it's going to actually save and run the container from. So this I might make something like this one /Adguard, and that's a basic list of it. If we did use some environment variables, we could specify it here, but we're not going to do anything else. We're just going to hit apply, and here's where the magic happens. You'll actually see it picks up this name here, it sees what the tag is, and it's busy extracting. It's actually busy downloading the Docker container from the internet, and it's going to be hosting it off of this MikroTik. So once this process is finished, we will actually see what the operating system and the architecture is. So we see it is Linux and it is AMD 64 based, and that's perfect for us. If you wanted to add stuff like logging, you could just click on logging, or add DNS servers for it, you could do it here, but this is just the basis of it. You also see it did automatically fill in the work directory for us, which is fine. I'm just going to hit OK here, and initially when you import or add any type of container, it will always be in a stop state. So to start it, you can just highlight it and click on start. But what I recommend you do, because Dockers are sometimes very, I don't want to say finicky, but by default, if the MikroTik gets rebooted and it powers back on again, the Dockers will start up in a stopped state. Now MikroTik has actually added a very useful command from terminal that you need to run this, and that is when you do a container, you can actually do a set command, and then there is a start on boot option. Now this will allow the container to start up on boot. So we could just do a container print to see all of the containers, and then we can find the item of the container that we want to start on boot. So we're just going to go back into container, set start on boot equals yes, and I'm going to use item number 0. I'm going to hit OK, and if I print that again, you'll see it is now start on boot. Now again, what this means is if I reboot the MikroTik, it will start up automatically. Great. Now let's quickly see, is my container actually up and running? So if I ping 10.0.0.2, which is the IP address of the container, I am getting a response. Perfect. So now we can go on to step 3, where we actually set up Adguard. Now to get to Adguard, I'm actually going to do the setup now from my Linux machine on its browser. So I'll head onto my browser, and I'm going to use the IP address that I assigned for that Docker. So 10.0.0.2 on port 3000, because that is what is recommended on the initial setup or quick start guide on hub.docker.com. It is also on HTTP that you're accessing this. So once I do that, you're on the Adguard basic setup. So what we do here is we just click on get started. It will ask you what is the admin web interface. We'll leave this as port 80, but you could change it to 8080 or 443 or whatever you felt comfortable with. It will ask you what DNS server listening port is going to be. It is 53 by default, and I do suggest just leaving that. So we'll just leave all of this as it is at the moment. I'll click next. Now you can specify an admin account to actually log onto the device. So for this, I'm going to use something like enb admin, and then you can set a password. I'm just going to make that whatever I feel comfortable with. It needs to be 5 characters. Make sure you remember what this is, because if you don't, you might just have to kill and redo the container again. So let's continue. Let's save that, and here it just explains basically how to configure AdguardHome on each of the devices. Now what's wonderful is since we are setting this up on our router directly as a container, we're actually going to use this as our DNS server for all of our clients to actually break out to the internet with. So this is super useful and awesome for us. And why is that awesome? Well, maybe you have devices that you can't install the Adguard client on, like a television or maybe some type of fridge or something, and you still want those devices not to receive any types of ads. Then this is how you'd go about that. You'll use a router and you'll basically do this whole DNS pointing business. Now we have set up Adguard, so we can just open the dashboard, asks us to log in, and that was TMB admin and then the password that I set it to. And now we are on the Adguard dashboard. Wonderful. Okay, just another brief explanation. How does Adguard actually do its magic if we think about it? Because I'm talking about DNS and stuff the whole time, but what I want you to understand with Adguard, it's actually dropping ads on a DNS level based off of a filter list that is being stored in its database that we can get off of the internet or we can create ourselves. And in essence, what it is doing is whenever one of our clients is asking the DNS server, which is Adguard in this case, how to get to specific sites, Adguard will give it the site's IP address and then you'll connect. But many times these sites have these ad companies and stuff injected into them where it's popping up in your browser to show you all of these specific ads. Now what Adguard is doing is whenever it sees any type of DNS request for those, let's say, ad sites, if it is in the filter list, it will immediately drop traffic for that. It will null route all of those requests so that they just go to 0000, and then your client, your computer won't actually know how to get to those ad sites, and then they just won't appear on your browser. It's actually very smart. If you ask me, it's a great way to go about blocking ads. Now, is Adguard 100% effective at blocking all ads? No, because no filter list is 100% complete. There's always going to be some new stuff that comes out, or maybe the site that you're on is giving ads out directly, like something like YouTube. Even though I've seen Adguard block some ads on something like YouTube, it doesn't block everything, to be quite honest, but it's definitely a step up from, not like having Adguard, because this way at least you are blocking many of the ads that would be served to you. So with that out of the way, let's discuss the dashboard. Now this is a wonderful panel where you can just see how many DNS queries have been made, what has been blocked, if there has been any blocked malware or phishing attempts or blocked adult websites. Cool. We can also see which clients have currently connected, and from here you can see if we highlight a client, we can block it. So if we see somebody that we don't know on the network that we don't want to serve any DNS requests to, we can block them from here by just clicking on the block button. And we can obviously also see all of the different domains that are being queried, which is quite nice. Now, before I go into settings, again, I want to go into the filters, because this is again where all of the magic happens. If we look at the DNS block list, you'll see by default Adguard has an Adguard DNS filter, which has a bunch of rules in it, which has basically been set to block specific ad content sites. We can also add additional, let's say, filter rules just by enabling them here, because this add away default block list is here by default as well. And you can also add new block lists just by going here. You can either add a custom list or choose one from a list, and then there is a basic list of many other people that have configured filters. So I could add stuff like this Dan Pollock's list, Stephen Black's list, Peter Lau's list, Energize Spark, and just save it. And now, based off of their experiences and whatever they've said to block in their own lists, that will now be blocked. So we can see Stephen Black's list actually has many rules against it to block specific ad serving sites. Hooray! So now we are blocking a bunch of ad sites, which is awesome for us. So is it actually working? Let's test this out. Let's go to a website and see what the experience is. So if I do something like go to www.kotaku.com, which I know usually has a ton of ads at the bottom. Let's see if that's still the case. So if I've got Kotaku open, I can scroll down here and see exactly what's happening. And if I get to the very bottom, we should actually see that it doesn't have any of those ads, which is awesome. I mean, Kotaku generally looks like an ad site to me, to be honest. Like a lot of this looks like ads, but quite honestly, at the very bottom, you know those weird ads like 7 things you won't believe celebrities do, type of things that get up here, or drink this and it will make you healthy in 8 days. Those type of ads, they've been busted, they've been destroyed. Same if I go into a site like www.socialblade.com/YouTube/C/the network berg, which is my social blade, which I obsess over because I'm trying to see if my channel is actually growing or doing well or not. And it's doing okay. It is actually doing really well. I'm really happy with how our views and subscriber count looks, so thank you guys. But typically with a site like this, you'll have these banner ads on the side that is annoying you, and with AdguardHome now activated, it's blocking all of these ads for us. Now let's go back onto Adguard and just talk a bit more about other things that you can do with the filters. So what I actually want to show you is, if we go to our query log, we can actually see a list of domains that have been blocked, or a list of ad serving content sites that has been dropped. And here we can see exactly which filter list has blocked it and what it has blocked. And there's awesome things that you can do. I mean, if you actually want to see the stuff and receive whatever it was trying to send you, it's as easy as coming here and just clicking on the unblock button. You can also block specific URLs from here if you see that there's something that is getting through that you don't want to get. It's really easy and straightforward. So let's also go into some further filters. So next thing I want to check out is the DNS allowed list, which does the reverse of what the block list does, obviously. So any allowed list that you might have created here, it will in essence allow any of the domains that's part of that list, which is super useful as well. Although I want to stress, you can also do stuff like custom filtering here, when you can specify, and this is what happens when you either go to your query log and you allow or block something, it will add it to this custom filter list in this manner, where this add is basically allowing a specific domain, and just the two pipes will basically be blocking a domain. And you can do stuff like rejects and whatnot on here. So it is really awesome. And here is two more things that are actually really cool. Next up, DNS rewrites. So this is in essence like your local DNS entries on your DNS server now. So we could add a DNS rewrite for something. I could maybe make something like MikroTik.tmb, which is my MikroTik, and now I combine it to my MikroTik's IP. So my MikroTik's LAN IP is 172.16.0.1 for my Ubuntu VM. So I will save this, and if I go into my terminal and I do a ping against that host name now, which was MikroTik.tmb, I can see it actually resolves against that IP address now. And this is because the Adguard server is now my DNS server. If I go onto my browser and I type in the MikroTik's IP, I should be able to get onto the webfig, and I do, and it's there. That's how easy and cool it is. So you can in essence give local devices on your network DNS entries this way to access everything on a domain name, instead of having to memorize each and every little IP address everywhere. Super useful. Next thing is the blocked services. Now this allows you to basically block a specific service on demand globally for every client, which is super useful as well, because maybe you don't want people on the network to be able to go to Tinder or WeChat or Snapchat or weird stuff like that, or maybe you want to block certain stuff like Reddit. This is where you can come and do this. So this is almost like a little bit of UTM functionality built into the Adguard. It does work. It's just going to drop the connections when you put it on. Example would be, let's quickly turn on the YouTube one and try and access YouTube. So YouTube, where are you? It would help if I wanted to say put my glasses on, but they're already on. There we go, YouTube, hit save. And if I now go to www.youtube.com, what happens? It opens, but what actually happens when I try and go into a video? Now, what's gonna happen? It loads, and you can already see YouTube looks super weird. None of the videos have any thumbnails, and the videos are in essence just going to be loading. But stuff that you also might see is just no connection, errors like that. But it's super useful that you can actually block applications using Adguard. Let's just turn this back off so we can actually get to YouTube. So let's just refresh this, see what happens. And we should now see that the actual video starts playing. We can maybe just close the page and reopen it or clear our cache. Everything will work super fine. Now, I want to go to the settings now to explain a few things. I wanted to first do the filters with reason, because with the settings, you can actually go into client settings and add a client specifically to do stuff with that client. So you could block services specifically for a certain client. So maybe you still want to be able to get to something like YouTube, but you don't want your children on their phones to be able to get to it for some reason, because maybe you're a little bit strict, or you don't want them to access certain things after certain hours. You can come here and just add clients for them and block specific services related to them. So maybe I could make this my kid, and the tag here could be just a general thing. So we could say it's a device PC or a device phone or something. So you could put all of the phones in here, and you can add an identifier. So this would be the IP address or their MAC address or something, but I'm just going to make this 172.16.0254, which I know is my Linux machine's IP. And now from here you can do stuff like actually go in here and block specific services. You can set it to not use the global blocked services, and now you can say, hey, I don't want this IP to be able to go to Steam or Skype or QQ or whatever, save it. And now that specific machine is going to get restricted based off of this, which is super useful. Other stuff we want to look at the settings is our general settings, which is basically just going to tell you how everything just functions, but it's really brief. It's really straightforward. You don't really need to tweak or touch anything with the general settings. DNS settings, I can say, could be useful, because from here you can see what DNS servers on the outside Adguard is using to do its database and querying for. So at the moment it's set to Quad 9's DNS, but you can fill in your own DNS. So maybe you want to use stuff like Google's DNS as well, or you want to use Cloudflare DNS as well. Then you can set them in here in this manner. You can also set it to load balance, so it will choose between all of these DNS servers to pick the fastest one, and it will just go between them the whole time. You can do parallel request or the fastest IP address, which means the one that's closest will obviously be doing the resolving. We can just go down, click on apply, and then it will save those changes for any additional servers. You can also go to this hyperlink to actually get a nifty little, let's say, URL of additional known DNS providers that you can come and choose from to see what they typically do offhand, because maybe you want to find something specifically to, block certain things on that DNS level without Adguard's involvement. Anyways, like stuff that's blocking malware, then you can add these IPs as the DNS servers as well, and it will just help you in that manner. If we scroll down, we can see the rate limit of DNS requests, what the default blocking mode is. Now, this is nice because this kind of explains what it's doing whenever let's say a filtered thing gets matched, and it's either going to block it or it's going to null route it, or what's going to happen with it. We can also set our DNS cache size, and that's basically it for the general settings. Encryption settings, I'm not going to touch too much over, so don't worry about that. Same with the DHCP settings. What's nice is you can enable this as a DHCP server, so that this can issue out IP addresses on the network if needed, but I'd still probably leave that function to the router. Now, what happens if you have some issues with your Adguard and you just want to disable it temporarily? Well, from your dashboard, you can also just disable the protection, and now Adguard is off. You'll even see that it goes into an off state in this little icon, and now you don't need to worry about anything being blocked. That's also super useful if you just want to quickly troubleshoot something on the network. Alright, so this about is going to wrap up this Adguard video. I hope you've enjoyed it and you've learned something new. And I hope this shows you how amazing containers and MikroTik is. I really love working with this stuff, and I'd love to hear what your experiences has been. So please feel free to leave a comment. And with that, I'd also just like to thank my YouTube members and Patreons, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.